First of all, I really loved Sex and Vanity. It was fantastic. Thank you for writing such an entertaining book.
I'm so glad you enjoyed it. I mean, that's all I wanted to do, make people laugh and amuse them.
So it's kind of based around EM Forster's classic A Room with a View, but it's obviously not exactly the same. So how does your book, Sex and Vanity, depart from A Room with a View?
I think it really uses A Room with a View really, as you said, as a departure point. The initial setup is there. It's a girl who swaps rooms with a boy. But from there, the story just explodes in a whole different direction. My Lucy is living in 2013. And so I had to make her issues, her struggle relevant to her life today. And she's also Hapa. She is, biracial. Her mother's Chinese American, and her father comes from a very elite WASP family. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, sort of a slang logo that we use here. So she has to balance, sort of the needs of being pulled in two different directions, two different cultures, two different classes, and then also trying to deal with fitting into, the world at large.
Absolutely. But I mean, the love for A Room with a View does sort of filter through the whole novel. Tell me, why did you love it so much?
Well, I discovered the book when I was probably 15 years old. And I think at that time, all the English sort of novels I'd read from earlier times tended to be sort of fussy and sort of, they were ancient. I mean, love Pride and Prejudice, love Trollope, but, they're rooted in a certain era. Whereas Forster, even though he wrote this book in 1908, it just seems so modern. The way he got into Lucy's head, the stream of consciousness, and he really, for his time, was, I think, so ahead of his time. And he also really had fun skewering the upper classes of Britain in a way that's sort of similar than I do. It's done with love. It's not a hatchet job. I'm not out to get anyone. I'm just here to point out the sometimes silly absurdities and the humor one finds in snobbery and pretentiousness and people who are always competing to climb these social ladders that, and be the most fashionable or the most fabulous or have the most Instagram followers, things like that. So, I love the book. And of course, it was the book that introduced me to Italy. Reading his book, it was set in Florence, and then the action moves back to England, but it really went to go to Italy. And so I was able to visit Italy a few years later, and that's where I discovered Capri. And ever since then, it's been a love affair with an island.
Well, let's talk about Capri, the setting for your book. I mean, it must have been so difficult to do the research for this setting, judging by the photos that you've posted on your Instagram. Really arduous work.
It was torture, pure torture. The pasta I had to eat, the beach clubs I had to sit and sort of relax in, the swimming in the coves, the beautiful glistening coves. Horrible. No. Yeah, it was really fantastic. And it's an island I go to quite frequently. So really, over the past 10 years, every time I go, I would begin sort of writing the novel in my head. Things would happen to me that would inspire me. I really was on a crazy speedboat that went from Capri to Positano and hanging on for dear life on this military rig. And so I had that experience. And I've also been to that fabulous sandal shop where you find the most amazing handmade sandals. His family's been making sandals for the likes of Jackie Onassis and Grace Kelly and now Sarah Jessica Parker. So it was really fun to discover that island and really file away all these tips. And really my goal is to, if we can't be there, this is hopefully the next best thing.
Oh, for real, for sure. You mentioned Lucy's biracial identity, and you kind of go into quite a bit of depth of her struggle with this, with her sort of being torn into two. So just talk to me a little bit about your exploration of this, because she's quite torn, but then she's kind of very judgy of George, who she believes is too Asian for her.
Exactly. I mean, I like to say she's a messed up girl. And I think it's because of this interesting place she finds herself born into, being biracial, but also from these two very vastly different families. And she doesn't even realize, I mean, she sees that there's an internalized racism amongst some of her relatives. Some of them treat her like a princess, which she doesn't want to be treated. And the others treat her like she's not good enough for them. So she gets all these mixed signals that I think make her very confused. And they also create for her an internalized racism. because she lives in America, because she's trying to fit in with her waspy, Ralph Lauren type relatives, she negates her Asian side. And so along comes this strapping dude, this beautiful Asian god of a man, and she's physically attracted to him. The chemistry is just, as they say, crazy, but her mind is saying, I can't go there, I can't go there, can't go there. And I think that provides, the drama and the comedy and the amusement of the book. But it's also a way into looking at a very meaningful issue, I think, which is, the subtle microaggressions and the subtle racism that exists for all different types of people.
And your character Cyril, for example, is what we would probably classify as a rich people problem. I mean, I know that was the title of one of your other books, but he experiences classic rich people problems. I mean, the guy is probably about as shallow as a puddle. Talk to me about his character.
I mean, he was actually really fun to write, I think, because I actually, living in New York and living in LA, I do come across quite a few Cecils, sort of these sort of preening peacocks that really, they're not really living for themselves. They're living for social media. Every moment of their lives has to be a perfect Instagrammable moment. But hopefully readers will see that he's not just that. I mean, I wanted to explore why he is who he is. And you see also in his life, there's a history of bullying, and his family was very new money, so they did not fit in to old money Houston, for example. And then when they moved to New York, they also didn't fit in. So you see all the different levels of struggles these people have, albeit they are sort of champagne problems compared to the rest of us, right?
Absolutely. Tell me as well, why do you think so many people have identified with your books? Because I mean, they've just exploded all across the world. So it's not just, appealed to a particular group of people. It's appealed all across the board. Why do you think that is?
I think because the themes and the stories are so universal. We all have crazy families. We all have snobby cousins. There's always that meddling auntie or uncle. So I think people all around the world, from Poland to Tel Aviv to South Africa, have told me, our families aren't rich or Asian, but they're just as crazy as the ones you write about. And so I think there's a commonality there. We're all tortured in one way or another by our families. And I'm trying to really look at the absurdities of all that. I'm coming from a tortured family myself. You have to turn into humor, otherwise what do you do?
Certainly.
Of course, the food helps also, I think. I write a lot about delicious food and style and travel. And, I think for me, when I look at a book, I want to escape into it. I want to escape into a different world. And I think many readers, they get that with my books. It's sort of an ice cream sundae, but it's actually kind of good for you too. I think it's a little bit nutritious. It's not all just candy.
And it makes you happy.
Hopefully. I mean, that's all I do. I try to, channel as much joy as I can to writing them, and joy for the readers.
Tell me, I read somewhere that Sex and Vanity is also going to be made into a film. So that must be quite exciting for you.
It's very exciting. It was just announced yesterday. Sony Pictures and SK Global. SK Global was actually responsible for Crazy Rich Asians a few years ago. So, working with the same producing team again, and then now with Sony, we really can't wait to make this movie as soon as we can.
So I'm going to ask you a sneaky question. Who would you imagine in those lead roles? Who do you see as Lucy? Who do you see as George?
I mean, that's a very, very sneaky question. There are so many young, talented actors around today, that I think would do marvelously in that role. I really shouldn't say any names because I don't want to make things competitive for so many actors. But yeah, there's such an amazing talent pool coming out of Hollywood, coming from around the world, and whenever we do cast movies, especially for Crazy Rich Asians, we launched a worldwide search and we found actors in England and Australia. No one from South Africa so far, but hopefully, you never know. There might be a George hiding somewhere in South Africa, don't you think? Or Lucy.
It's totally possible. Yeah. It's come from anywhere.
for some of the other characters, like Rosemary Zhao, the mother of George, I think, Michelle Yeoh could do an amazing job.
Wow.
I think she does comedy so well. For Charlotte, cousin Charlotte, I mean, Reese Witherspoon would be a dream.
That
Don't
would
you
be,
think?
yeah.
So I'm sort of compiling my little wish list in my mind and going to send out a lot of prayers and light a lot of candles and see what happens.
Tell me, I know this is another sneaky question because the book has just been published, but are you already casting your eye to what your next project is going to be?
Well, I've actually been really busy writing a television series. So I'm doing a series with STX Entertainment, and it's going to be, 1-hour drama series. And I call it Downton Abbey meets David Lynch in Asia.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, so I've been really, when I'm not on the phone or Skype with reporters, doing interviews, I've been working nonstop trying to meet deadlines for my scripts.
When will that go to air? Do you know? Or when will that start?
I mean, fingers crossed, everything works out perfectly. Hopefully next year. But also, Sex and Vanity is the first in a new trilogy of books.
Yeah.
I call it my cities trilogy. Because each book pays tribute to another city. So the first book, of course, is my love letter to New York. The next book in the series will be London, and the final book will end in Paris.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Some more tough research for you to do, I see there.
This is, you've caught me. This is just my big excuse to spend time in London and Paris.
Kevin, I have to say something to you. I was interviewing an author yesterday. He is from Namibia, or Nambia, as Donald Trump likes to call it, which is, Namibia is South Africa's neighboring country. And
I've always wanted to go to Namibia. It's one of my dreams to visit the Skeleton Coast.
Oh, wow. Okay, so at least you know where it is.
Oh, yeah.
So this author is based in Windhoek, the capital of Namibia. And when he heard that I was going to be interviewing you, he freaked out and he said to me, he made me promise that I would tell you that you've got a fan in Windhoek in Namibia.
Fantastic. I'd love to know about his book. I'm always so curious to read books from other countries, and I've never read a Namibian author. So tell me what his book is.
Well, his name is Remy Ngamije. He was born in Rwanda but grew up in Windhoek. Okay. He's really young. He's like in his late 20s. And he wrote a book called The Eternal Audience of One, which is about a young man whose parents flee Rwanda during the genocide and settle in Namibia, and he gets brought up there. But he's particularly, the boy, the protagonist, is particularly smart and mouthy and wants a bit more from his life than Windhoek, which he finds quite dreary. And he manages to get himself to university in Cape Town, where he studies law and meets this group of friends. And it's kind of like, it reminded me a bit of Americana in a way. I don't know if you've read Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's book. It reminded me a little bit of that, but with a distinctly Namibian feel. It's full of humor and wit and warmth, and it's just a superb first novel. I
can't wait to read it. I can't wait to read it.
I'll send you.
Could you email me just the title and the author's name? I'll buy it immediately.
Thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate it, and can't wait for the next book and for the television series.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been a delight.